Good morning, everybody. My name is Anna Kaplan. I'm New York State Senator, proudly representing the 7th Senate District. I'm going to take some time and introduce some of our representatives here today. We have with us our wonderful Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin, Senator Jim Gorin, Senator May, Senator Stavitsky, Senator Brooks, Senator Boyle, Senator Sue Serino, and Senator Liu, Senator Prasad, Senator Bailey, and Senator Borrello. Did I have everybody? Okay. We also have Assembly members Chuck Levine, Assembly member Rosenthal, Weinstein, Steve Stern, Simberwit, Seawright, Saletti, and McNabb. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. With my special thanks and gratitude to Simon Wiesenthal Center for bringing this important exhibit to our state capitol for all of us to see, and especially to our wonderful Rabbi Abraham Cooper for flying all the way here from Los Angeles to be with us today. When we talk about the Holocaust, we say, never again. But in order to forget something, you need to learn about it in the first place. And the stats show us that we're not doing a good job teaching the next generation about the atrocities of the Holocaust and the 6 million Jews who were murdered by Nazis. A recent study by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany laid out shocking statistics that exemplify the problem. Among New Yorkers ages 18 to 39, 58% can't name a single concentration camp. 19% believe that Jews caused the Holocaust. And 28% believe the Holocaust is a myth or a story that has been exaggerated. Let that sink in for a minute. More than a quarter of New Yorkers ages 18 to 39 believe that Holocaust is a myth or has been exaggerated. I will point out also that in each of these three categories, New York ranked dead last of any other state in this country. A truly shocking fact, considering just how many Holocaust survivors settled right here in our state and called New York their home. The lessons of Holocaust are more important today than ever before, as we all watch in horror as a peaceful European nation is invaded under false pretenses and cynically using Holocaust misinformation as an excuse to do so. It is critical that we all know our history, that we learn from it, and to ensure that never again is not just a saying, but something we work to deliver. That is why I asked the Simon Wiesenthal Center to bring the Courage to Remember exhibition here to Albany, so that everyone here can take it in and learn about this vital history, and so that we can continue to have this important dialogue about the issue of Holocaust education and how we're failing to properly teach this history here in New York. With that, I would like to invite Rabbi Abraham Cooper to talk more about the exhibit and speak to the importance of this history against the backdrop of the crisis in Ukraine, as we're watching right now happening. Rabbi Cooper.
Thank you, Senator Kaplan. Good morning, everyone. Don't worry, I'm not going to mention every single elected official. I'm an old man. I couldn't remember my name some mornings. But I do, first of all, want to thank the Lieutenant Governor, Brian Benjamin, for being here. We consider everyone's presence here today an act of solidarity. And to also call out two other important leaders here. Starting, we hope, in the next academic year, the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Mobile Tolerance Center will be up and running and functioning in New York. Not everybody can come to a museum. Not everyone can be flying 3,000 miles away to visit us in LA. But in terms of bringing the education to where it needs to be brought to, I want to thank first Assembly Member Rebecca Seawright, who wrote the initial letter of endorsement for our project, and especially to New York State Assembly Member Helene Weinstein, who's been absolutely indefatigable in making sure that we'll be able to help the students and teachers of New York, hopefully if the bus holds up, into every district of this amazingly diverse state. I can say that now. I grew up in Flatbush, and when a long time ago, we weren't really sure that Staten Island belonged to New York City. So it was like really far away before the Verrazano Bridge. And also just a word about the exhibit itself. I was telling some of the elected officials that this exhibition actually opened for the first time in 1988 in Vienna, Austria, on the 50th anniversary to the date that Adolf Hitler arrived in Vienna to the adulation of hundreds of thousands of supporters just before the beginning of the Second World War. Since then, it's been translated into over a dozen languages, and it's, is that me? Sorry. I don't know how to kill this, but I'll try. I'll ask maybe one of the center folks if they can come by and take this away. I don't want to throw it because I might need it later. Yeah. Courage to Remember has been, and I had the honor of presenting it, opening in New Delhi, India. More on that a little bit later. In Japan, where 3 million people have seen it. In South America, and across the United States, because as we've learned from these statistics, and also know within our own families, you cannot assume that you can transfer values, family history, communal history by osmosis to the next generation. It's something you have to work at. And that's why when I first met Senator Kaplan and she told me about her legislative initiative, from the beginning, why we considered it to be so important for her legislation to be passed without knowing today's headlines, not only here with statistics in New York State and California, but events around the world. So this morning, on behalf of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, I want to dedicate today's opening of Courage to Remember here in the state's capital to Boris Romachanko, a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor in Kharkiv. Hitler couldn't kill him. Nazi commandants in 4 different concentration camps, including Bergen-Belsen and Buchenwald, they couldn't kill him. But Vladimir Putin's troops just did. He died in his apartment, which was an apartment building that was under assault by a military, even though he lived in a residential area and there was nothing anywhere near the apartment that he lived in. So here we are, a 96-year-old survivor with a capital S, whose life was snuffed out by Vladimir Putin's troops in the Ukraine. I'm here also, again, to thank not only Senator Kaplan, but the amazing cross-section of elected officials here in New York State for their tenacious commitment to update and expand Holocaust education for the young people of New York. Too many adults don't know how to impart the core lessons of the Shoah, and our kids are bombarded on TikTok, now in online games, and across social media platforms with pro-Nazi and anti-Semitic messaging. We are all subject to the barrage of Holocaust denial from the Iranian regime, Holocaust distortion from Putin's propaganda machine, the co-opting of Holocaust imagery by some in the anti-vaxxer movement. And we're here today as the world has a front row seat to the unleashing of evil against innocent children, their parents, as we see their cities reduced to rubble. About a decade ago, we opened our exhibition at the Indira Gandhi Center in New Delhi, India. And my good friend, Sri Ravi Shankar, who is a Hindu spiritual leader, a close friend, he has a small following of 14 or 15 million people. For India, that's not so big, but also is someone with influence. And I remember when he got up to speak in the presence of a Holocaust survivor, he pointed to a Supreme Court justice who was in the audience and said, "I know what you're thinking." You know, yes, I know what you're thinking. I'm your teacher. You're not saying it because you're polite. What do I teach you? Well, I'm a Hindu teacher, a Hindu master. So I try to teach you how to live in the moment. What's the name of the exhibition? Courage to Remember. So what's the connection between what I've been teaching you all of these years and this exhibition? And what he said 10 years ago is especially true this morning. In order to live today in the moment, you have to have courage to remember. And when we forget, we allow the Vladimir Putins of the world to suddenly redefine who's a Nazi, to erase not only buildings, but cultures and people. And I think the most important lesson that we want to impart through this exhibition, but in the end, it'll be up to the teachers, the older siblings, and parents, is to teach our kids a tough lesson. And that is, evil does exist in the world. We have to learn to recognize it, and we have to be prepared to fight. Because as Simon Wiesenthal, our great namesake, the Holocaust survivor and Nazi hunter, said, freedom is not a gift from heaven. It has to be fought for every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Cooper. Next, I would like to ask our Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin to say a few words. I also want to include, we've been joined by Senator Hoylman and Senator Plumbo and Assemblywoman Buttonchak and Assemblymember Jacobson.
Thank you so much, Senator Kaplan, for allowing me to join you today for this important announcement, the opening of the Courage to Remember. I also want to thank the leaders of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for your important work, which has been made possible today. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of the Global Social Action, who is joining us from Los Angeles, and the Eastern Director, Michael Cohen. You know, when I first walked in here and I saw the assemblage of legislators, I was confused if I was at the right place. But when you talk about hate, I want it to be very clear as you see us standing here today, that is not a partisan issue. We stand together as Republicans and Democrats against hate from the past, hate in the present, and hate in the future. And we will do everything we can to make sure that we root out all hate. But you can't root out hate if you don't look at hate and that has happened in the past, understand it, and make sure that you are resolved to ensure that it never happens again. You know, when I think of Senator Kaplan and her story, she arrived to this country as a young refugee, seeking freedom to practice her religion and to live a life free of discrimination. Like so many other families, her family found that freedom right here in New York. And to ensure that others could have that same chance at a New York dream, she entered public service. First in the town council, and now is the first refugee elected to the New York State Legislature, and the only Jewish religious refugee in the state legislature. We both came to public service for similar reasons, and I want to thank Senator Kaplan for helping to lead us on a major step forward for all New Yorkers. What we're doing today could not be more timely. Disinformation and anti-Semitism is alive and well on our streets. And we must continue to send New Yorkers and the rest of the world a very simple message. Hate has no place here. Not against our Jewish siblings, not against our Asian American siblings, and not against any New Yorkers, because hate, in essence, is not who we are as a people. We must make efforts like this to remind the next generation, as Senator Kaplan so ably referenced, that what can happen, or what can happen when we're not vigilant. These 40 panels that you see outside that vividly display the magnitude and humanity and remind us of the horror of the Holocaust, that it is unique. The root causes that led to it are things that we're still dealing with this very day, as we have been seeing. When I think of the 6 million Jews and millions of others who were murdered by Nazis between 1933 and 1945, I am overwhelmed with sadness. But we make the solemn promise that if we stand together, we will ensure, as the Rabbi just mentioned, that we will stamp out ugliness wherever it presents itself, wherever in the world. And us being united is more important than ever to make sure that we get that accomplished. You know, during the Civil Rights Movement, one of the most important partners that Martin Luther King Jr. had was a rabbi named Joachim Prince, who devoted much of his life to the Civil Rights Movement. As president of the American Jewish Congress, he represented the Jewish community at the March on Washington, where he said, the most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. We here today will not be silent. In his memory and for what he stood for, we will stamp out anti-Semitism, we will stamp out all forms of hate, and we will not forget the horror of the Holocaust. New York stands behind its Jewish brothers and sisters and behind all people who experience hate and violence. Thank you all for allowing me to say a few words today, and I want to thank Senator Kaplan for helping us come here today. We have the courage to remember. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Michael Cohen, Eastern Director of Simon Wiesenthal Center.
Thank you so much, Senator Kaplan and Rabbi Cooper, Lieutenant Governor, and each and every one of you here today. We can't do this alone. This has to be a broad coalition. We need to make sure that there is support to fight hate. Hate doesn't just be fought on its own. Hate needs to be fought, and we need the diverse coalition we have here to make sure that happens. We need to make sure that we have the tools to do so, such as the Courage to Remember exhibit, the Mobile Tolerance Center that's coming online, and make sure that there is no school district in our state that has an excuse to say, I don't have the tools to teach this properly. Senator Kaplan has been such an incredible champion of making sure that that message resonates and that message is forced upon school districts to make sure that we have the courage to remember and we have the tools to do so and to teach our children and our next generation that hate, as Lieutenant Governor so ably said, has no place in New York. Thank you so much to each and every one of you here today. This is the kind of coalition that's necessary to beat down hate. So really, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we look forward to our continued partnership. Thank you.
Assembly Member Chuck Levine, he stepped out. Are there any other electeds that would like to say a few words? Please.
It's like asking a rabbi.
Okay, there's a long line of members behind me who want to say. Let me just, on behalf of the members of the assembly, here, I just want to thank Rabbi Cooper for coming back. I actually represent. We'll talk later about Brooklyn Jewish geography, about who we know. I represent part of Flatbush area. It's so important to have this group here. Last year, the Assembly was very proud to provide the capital funding for the mobile bus that will start, hopefully, next year or later this year to go around to schools, to libraries, to community centers, wherever there are people that we can teach about the history, not just of the Holocaust, but the mobile museum will educate young people, old people, citizens of New York about the tolerance. That's what's important. Some 70 years ago, the musical South Pacific debuted on Broadway, and there's a couple of lines in a song that I always think about when we talk about fighting anti-Semitism, fighting hate. And it says, "You're not born to hate. Hate has to be carefully taught." And the opposite of hate also has to be carefully taught. And that's what the Simon Wiesenthal Center stands for. And I know myself and my assembly colleagues stand proudly with the Wiesenthal Center, with the exhibit, the wonderful exhibit. I've been seeing people stop by, and thank you, Senator Kaplan, for bringing this here to Albany.
Anyone else? I want to thank all my colleagues for being here today, both from the Senate and Assembly. As you can see, this is a bipartisan issue. And I was blessed to have seen this exhibit in Long Island. And that's what the idea came to me, to ask to see if we could actually have this display here in the Capitol, to make sure all of my colleagues could take a look and hopefully go back to their own district and talk about the importance of this.